it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 24 of my 2021 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Cheery Christmas, A Bug Deal, Frosty Fairy Friends, and Joy to the Woods. So I've stamped my images out with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm going to be doing the squirrels with some warm grays, which may surprise some of you since red squirrels are one of my most favorite animals. But I'm working with an inspiration photo for our current Lawn Fanatics challenge, and there's a lot of like silver and gold in there as well as some other colors. So I decided to go with the warm grays because they kind of have that silvery tone. So I'm using W1, W3, and W5, laying in some shadows first with that W5, and then blending out with the W3. Then I'm going to come on with the W1 and blend out the face and the side, the little hindquarters, and the rest of the tail. And then I'm actually going to bring in the W00 to do the belly, so that's a little bit lighter and just provides some more contrast. And then I am going to go and do a second layer on these guys as well. This is something that I do a lot with my images because it just makes your blend so much nicer, and it just makes that images stand out that much more because it increases the saturation. So I'm going to show you guys the difference between the two once we get there, but first I want to finish with this little guy. It's real quick and easy to do because I'm just going right over the colors that I did previously with that second layer. And then I'm going to start on the second little squirrel, and I'm going to color her exactly the same, but I am going to flip her shadows to her back side, so her right side. I want to have the light source in the center between these guys, so their faces will remain nice and bright and light, and then their back sides will be in the shadow. So I'm moving on to her with the W5 for the shadows again, and then blending out with that W3. I'm going to fill in with the W1 and then save the belly for that W00. And then now you can kind of see the difference between the two. You can see that the image on the left is just much more smooth and the color is stronger than the one on the right hand side. The blend just isn't quite as nice, and that is just because Copics are meant to be blended and layered. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what you're supposed to do. If one pass works and you are happy with the way that it looks, fine, you can move on. But if you're not happy with it, go ahead and go over it. You can go over it 2 or 3 or 4 times if you want to. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're using a good quality paper, like I've mentioned to you guys lots of time, the quality of your paper is so important, then it should be no problem for your paper to handle all those layers. I'm going to move on to the rosy cheeks, and I'm using RV10 and RV11. This is a cool toned pink, so I thought it worked great for a winter card. And then I'm going to do the 2 big branches. Well, there's one larger and then one smaller, and those are from A Bug Deal, but I thought they would be perfect for the scene that I'm creating today. And I'm going to color those with E23, E25, and E27. So my highlight is coming from obviously above. This is going to be an outdoor scene, so it would be the sun or the moon. It's going to be kind of a darker sky, so it's probably towards evening time in this scene. So the shadows are definitely going to be more prominent on the underside of these branches. So that's what I went ahead and did with that E27. And then I'm starting to blend that out with the E25, but I'm still leaving a lot of room for the highlight shade, and that's because I want to add some detail to these branches and I want it to show up. So I want to make sure I have plenty of that lightest shade. And that way the texture that I'm going to add will be sure to really stand out. So if you want your details to kind of blend into your coloring, you can go ahead and do them right away. Like when I do dot detail to create some texture on some critters, I'll often go in right away if I want it to kind of fade in and disperse into the rest of that wet ink. If you want it to stand out a bit more prominently, you want to let your paper dry a bit. So I did let this paper dry for about, I would say maybe a minute, if that, because I didn't mind if it kind of faded in a little bit, but I definitely wanted you to see that it was there. And then I went in with that E27 and just added some little swirls and some little dash lines to give it that wood grain look. Then I'm going to do all of the little snow bits. Those are from Frosty Fairy Friends, and they're meant to go on the house, the little fairy house that's made out of a stump, but I'm actually going to use them on my branches for little snowy bits there to make it look like a nice snowy scene. So I colored those in with BG11. And then I wanted to pull in some gold from that inspiration photo. So I chose Y21 and Y26 to do the little toppers of each of the ornaments. And in fact, I'll pop a picture of our inspiration board in right here so you can kind of see what I'm working with. I'm doing the bottom right corner mostly, but I will be adding in touches of the silver and gold and that dark brown color as well. So now I'm going to do the acorn, and I'm going to use E41, E42, E43, E44, and E47. So for the cap, I'm going to start with E47 down at the bottom edge, and then blend up with the E44, and use the E43 for the highlight at the top. For the bottom, I'm actually going to put the shadow at the top because the cap is larger and that would cast a shadow. I use the E43 for that and then blend it down with the E42 and then the E41. And then I'm going to do one of my ornaments in that kind of yellow green that you saw in that inspiration photo. There was a whole bunch of ornaments scattered on a tabletop, and I'm going to be doing these 4 ornaments in the shades that those were in. So I have YG03, YG05, and YG07 for this first one, and I am doing a second layer on that. And then I also wanted to have that color represented in one more place, so I decided to do the bow on the tiny gift, which is also from Frosty Fairy Friends. I thought that would be the perfect size for one of these cute little squirrels to hold. Then I'm going to bring in some turquoise, and I chose BG32, BG45, and BG49. I'm going to do my shadow on the right hand side for all of these ornaments. Not necessarily any reason. They're going to be more toward the right hand side of the card, so going with that central light source, that just made the most sense. And I did 2 layers on that ornament as well because I want them to look really nice and shiny, so I don't want any harsh lines left behind. And then I decided to do the bow on the acorn in those shades as well. For the bright blue ornament, I'm using B24, B26, and B29. So I'm starting on the right hand side with that B29 once again, also doing a little shadow right up at the top underneath that gold topper, and then blending toward the left and doing 2 layers once again. I'm going to do 2 layers on all of those ornaments. And then for my second object with that shade, I'm going to do the wrapping paper of that tiny gift. And I put my shadow down at the bottom and the highlight at the top because it's going to be going in one of the little squirrel's hands. And then I'm going to do kind of like a mulberry shade. It's like a cross between red and purple, and I chose RV63, RV66, and RV69. So I'm just going to color that in the same way, and of course do 2 layers, especially on this one because there's quite a bit of difference between the RV63 and the RV66. So it really needed it anyway to just make sure that everything was blended nicely. And then I'm going to do the part that would normally be bright red of a Santa hat with these shades as well, just so everything matches in that color palette. And I put my shading on the bottom right side as well, just because that's the way the hat is tipped anyway. And it's going to go on the head of the squirrel that's going on the right as well. So it's going to fit. And then I use C1 for the little white bits of that hat. I grabbed a black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and went over the eye of that one squirrel. And then I trimmed these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm going to be using some Let It Shine Snowflakes 6x6 pattern paper, and I want to use the one that is this dark turquoise with the tiny snowflakes. So I'm going to trim that one down, and I'm also going to trim out a piece of metallic silver cardstock. I'm using the stitched scallop rectangle frames for that, which is going to leave that inner piece that I can save for a different project. I also trimmed out 2 snowdrifts with the stitched hillside borders, and I'm going to stamp on the taller of the 2, so I'm going to pop that in my MISTI, and I'm going to be stamping a sentiment from Joy to the Woods in Blue Jay ink. So I'm just lining that up in the center of that bottom snowdrift. And once I'm happy with how that is positioned, I will close the door of my MISTI to pick that up, and then I can ink that up and stamp that down. I'll be using my Twiddler's Nook pressure pal to make sure I get a nice impression. That stamped almost perfect on the first go. The S wasn't quite as dark, so I did stamp it down a second time. And then I'm going to do an insert for the inside of my card because I'm using a darker colored cardstock. So I just die cut that with the Lawn Fawn outside in stitch rectangle stackables. And I'm doing the little cardinal and the holly and the Merry Christmas sentiment, which are all from Joy to the Woods. So then I took some Lawn Fawn Rainforest cardstock and scored and folded that to be a standard A2 size card. So it's 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall with a top fold. I'm going to glue that insert down to the inside, and then I will take my pattern paper, which I just trimmed down with my paper trimmer to be slightly smaller than this scallop edge on that frame so that it would fit inside there without anything overhanging. And then I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the top of the bottom snowdrift so I can adhere the top one to it. And then I'm going to glue those down as well. And I decided to trim down just a tiny bit from the right side because I wanted to be sure that it fit behind that frame and it was a little bit larger than the pattern paper. So I'm going to get that situated down at the bottom. And then I've added some very thin strips of Scotch 3M foam tape to the outside edge of that frame. So I'm going to line that up and make sure it's on there nice and straight before I press that down into place. That glue is very sticky, or that foam tape. So I just want to make sure it's on there nice and straight before I start to press that down. It took me a couple tries to get it just right. So now I can bring in my images, and I'm going to start with the 2 tree branches. I know that this one is going to have to be trimmed down just slightly so that it's flush underneath the edge of that frame, and I want it to be just a little bit above that snowdrift, so I'm kind of using it as a placeholder while I add in the smaller of the 2 branches, just so I can make sure to have them spaced correctly. And then I will add some liquid glue to the back of the larger one as well. So I'm going to just tuck that under that frame once again, and that'll give me a nice place for my little squirrels to sit. So while that glue is still a little bit wet, and I didn't put it on the very ends of those branches so that I could tuck in these little pine boughs And those were stamped with Noble Fur ink, so they're a nice dark green. And I'm just trying to figure out where exactly I want them to go on this card. And I know these aren't really probably the right kind of branches for these pine boughs, but I just thought they looked Christmassy and was just a little bit something different. So I'm going to go ahead and add those, just tucking them under a few of the branches here and there. And I did stamp 4 of them, so I will take that last one and let it overhang a little bit of that frame. But I do want to make sure that it doesn't stick out any further than the scalloped border of the frame, because I want to be sure that this card will still fit inside a standard size envelope. Then I'm going to take my little piles of snow and add those to the branches, so it just gives it that frosty feel. And I'm going to take these little triangle pieces and just tuck them into the little crevices between the branches on this larger one. So I have those, and then I do have one more. I wasn't sure where exactly I wanted it to go with the squirrels, so I decided to add them first, but I will have to kind of shift them around then to get it where it should go. I want to make sure that these squirrels are spaced far enough apart that they can each hold their little gifts. So that little acorn does take up quite a bit of space there. So once I got that adhered, I realized they were going to be a little too close, and now I can add that snowdrift as well. But then I'm going to kind of push back the one with the acorn a little bit more to the left to make sure that I have room for the little girl squirrel to hold her gift. So I put that in her hands and then realized it was too close. So thankfully that glue was not fully dry yet, so I was able to kind of slide them just a little bit to the left and then give her the small gift to hold. And then she's going to be the one that is wearing that Santa hat, so I'll just add that to the top of her head and make sure it's not covering up her cute little eyelashes. And then I've got these 4 little ornaments, and I wanted those to be hanging from the trees as if they've just decorated so that they can celebrate Christmas together. So I'm going to take the green one and add that up to the smaller branch right above their heads. And then this blue one is going to go on the end. I'm just tucking the tops underneath the branch so it looks like it's actually hanging there. And then this turquoise one is also going to be hanging down on the lower branch. And then the 4th one I thought would be fun to add down in the snow as if it has fallen off. There was a lot of white space at the bottom of the card, so I thought it would be nice to kind of fill that in a little bit. So I was just playing with how I wanted that to lay so it would look like it actually fell in the snow, and I liked it with the top kind of tipped down. So that's what I did. And then I'm going to take that BG11 marker that I used to color in the little snow pieces on the branches and add that to the snowdrifts as well, so all of the snow matches. I just added that right to the top of the stitching detail, and then it was a little bit strong there with all of that white space, so I decided to blend that out with the BG10. Sorry I didn't show the caps there. I guess I didn't realize that my other hand was off screen that was holding them. And then of course I had to finish with some Stardust stickles, so I'm going to add that to all of the little snowdrifts and then to the snow on the ground as well. So all of that matches. Just using that nozzle to spread it out thinly so that it doesn't like get dried, you know, kind of crusty looking. And then I also decided to add some to the ornaments to make them look nice and sparkly as well. And I almost added it to the ribbons on the gifts and the white on the Santa hat, but I decided that would be too much, so I had to rein myself in just a little bit. But I think there's still plenty of sparkle on there, especially with that silver metallic cardstock. So there's a peek at the inside of the card, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. We are almost to the end. I can't believe it. If you did like it, please be sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. If you're interested in any of these products, I'll have them listed and linked for you in the description bar. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 videos from previous years of the holiday card series that I thought you would enjoy. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.